Good evening, everyone. We're going to wait a couple of minutes before we get started. So good evening again, everyone. We're going to give it maybe one more minute before we get started. Okay. Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the City of Dublin's Housing Element Update Community Workshop #1. We're glad that you could take some time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening. Before we get started, I just wanted to quickly introduce a couple of individuals who are present. My name is Michael Cass. I'm Principal Planner with the City of Dublin. Also from the city in attendance this evening are Jeff Baker, our Community Development Director, and Christy Wheeler, our Assistant Community Development Director. We also have a couple of representatives from the city's consultant who are present this evening. To get started, I'd like to introduce the presenter who will be running tonight's workshop, Dave Barquist from Kimley Horn and Associates. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for attending this evening. My name is Dave Barquist. I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates. We're working with the city as part of this process, so we're collaborating with all of you to bring this to a successful conclusion in a number of months. We also have joining us Inez Galmiche, who is playing the magician role this evening, and so she's been working on the presentation you see. So you can thank her in the background as she's working through this. So with that, I think we can get started. There's a number of folks that we see from the community that are participating. If you have friends or other colleagues that might be interested in participating that couldn't participate tonight, we are recording the meeting at this point, so it will be accessible on the website. So if somebody was not able to attend this evening, they're able to do that at a future date. So stay tuned for that information. We'll share with you at the conclusion of the workshop. So we have an agenda for you this evening for the next hour, and we'll try to stick to that timeline. So we'll work together to make sure you can get out and get your dinner on an appropriate hour. So if we move on to the next slide with the agenda, give me just a moment here. So what we'll be doing this evening is about 5 basic things. We'll overview the housing element and the housing element process to give you a clue of what we have to do to comply with what the law requires us to do here in California. We'll talk about the regional housing needs allocation and the regional housing needs assessment process. We like to call it RHNA for short. And as part of that, the engagement of you, the community members and interested parties, as well as involvement with the council, the commission, and other city departments within the process, and give you an update on what we've done thus far and what we continue to do and will continue to do into the future. And then finally, it's just a time for us to put on our big ears and listen to what you have to say. So we want you to be able to express some of your ideas initially, to give us some direction and a better understanding of where you think the community is today, where we think we could be in the future. And it really forms a foundation as we create policy and develop and analyze that as we progress through this process. At the tail end of this, we'll give you next steps and what to expect in the coming months and how to stay informed and engaged in the planning process. So with that, let's get started about an overview of the housing element. And so the housing element, as you can see, on the list here, it's a, there we go, excuse me. So the general plan of the City of Dublin, you see on the right part of the screen is a listing of all the different chapters, or what we call in California elements of the general plan. So the housing element is just one chapter or one element of that general plan. And what's important to note is that you see that box there on the right is all of these different topical areas all have to meet, agree, and be internally consistent with each other. And so each one of these chapters has a specific topic or a specific element within the community that it addresses. In this case, it's the housing element. And there are 7 elements that are mandated by California law that the city must abide by or have in their general plans. And there's a variety of other elements that the City of Dublin can choose just based on the community needs, such as community design and sustainability. That's something, economic development. These are locally specific policies and programs that you've chosen to add to your general plan. So the housing element, what does it do? It addresses housing needs for all segments, economic segments of the community. So if we look at the entire spectrum of need within your community, from those who are very successful and have a lot of accessibility to housing and opportunity, to those who may not have less of that. And so we want to look at the entire spectrum of that need within our community. And so we look at the projection of that need over a planning period, in this case, through 2023 to 2031. And so we look at what that future need is for our community. But the foundation of the housing element is really a policy plan. And what that means, it's an expression of the city's goals, policies, programs, and specific actions and objectives to guide housing into the future. So if we think of the housing elements foundation is a direction setting document that identifies priorities and specific actions the city will take over the planning period that addresses the community's needs in an effective way as possible. The housing element is unique, and it's unique in the fact that it's one of the only elements within a general plan that requires actual review and certification by the state of California. So it actually goes up to Sacramento. The state reviews it for compliance with a whole host of state laws, Senate bills, Assembly bills, and all these new regulations and standards, et cetera, to make sure that the city is developing a policy plan and a housing element that complies with what the law requires us to do. So what is the requirements of the housing element? We have, think of it as layers of the cake, as you see here on the screen. Is when we develop the housing element, there's a number of things that we're required to do, and there's good rationale of why we do it. Because at the end of the day, we're required to create a policy program. And like I said earlier, a direction setting document that's an expression of the community's desires and the means to get there. In order for us to get to that, we have to do a series of different things to give us enough information or a knowledge base so we can make informed and adequate and effective decisions in the future. So we look at a population and housing profile of the community, forms a foundation of understanding of our community, the housing needs of our community, and the overall demographics of who we are as Dublin residents. We want to look at housing constraints, and these could be non-governmental constraints such as how much we are charged for interest rates on mortgages, to access to lending. We have governmental constraints, which would be things such as the laws, rules, and regulations that the city requires for us to get housing approved. And we also have to look at resources, or those resources that are available to contribute to the development of housing, such as grant programs, community development block grants, federal, state, and local funding sources, assistance programs, and things of that nature that will be an assistance to housing in our community. One of the great parts of the housing element too is that we want to look back in our past and look at the lessons learned that we have from those accomplishments. So we have our last housing element, which is what we're currently adopted by the City Council. And it has a series of programs and policies. And we've had a number of years to implement those policies. So we look back at those and see how they've performed. And in some cases, we've implemented some programs that will no longer exist. In some cases, we haven't been so effective. We may need to adjust or modify programs. And because of the new laws and requirements that we have in the state, we may have to develop new programs and policies to comply with state law. So that hindsight is 2020, and we look back and we learn our lessons from the past is what will help guide us in the new policy in the future. And one of the important elements to the plan itself is to look at future growth need. Half of the equation of the housing element is to look at the existing needs of our community today, but the other half is to say, when we grow into the future, what are the sites and how can we accommodate that growth in our community given our current circumstances? So we have to do a rigorous process of analysis of sites to accommodate this regional housing needs allocation we'll talk about in a moment. And so we have to look very specific to all the opportunities in our community and where those appropriate and realistic sites to accommodate that growth in the future. So why do we update housing elements? Well, it's pretty basic. We must comply with state law, and it's an expression of how we comply with that state law. For those of you who don't know, housing is a very, very hot topic at the state level, and the state is identified as a housing crisis. The governor has signed a whole multitude of new housing laws over the last number of years. I think since 2017, we're upwards of 100 new laws that are specifically related to housing opportunities and the trickle down to the housing element and how we comply with that. But really, the housing element demonstrates that Dublin can meet its existing and projected housing needs. When we have growth in our community and change, we have those needs of new rooftops and new places to live. We need to express how we can do that. And this housing element allows us to do that. When we're compliant with state law and when we have those programs, policies to comply with that, it opens the door to the city for sponsored assistance programs such as state grants and funding, as well as trickle down from the federal government. So it's a great way to become eligible for a whole host of state funds. And we're lucky in this, with the unfortunate times of COVID, the silver lining is that the state has a lot of resources currently to give to communities for housing related programs. So this is a great way to provide that eligibility. But what's important too in the process is about you as a community member. It allows you to engage in this process, and speaking for the city council and leadership at the city is your voice matters. Your voice is our community. It allows you to help us to develop, fashion, and look at policy in a way that is reflective of the needs of the community. So your engagement in the planning process is really an important element of this update because it gives us a reality check and allows us to plan according to the needs of our community through the words that you have. So that's why you're here this evening, and we appreciate that. And then with the new state laws and the new regulations, there's a lot more teeth in the law now, where once we can make a promises that we don't have to keep. Nowadays, we want to do what we say we're going to do, and the state is compelling us to do that. So having a compliant housing element prevents or reduces the ability for the city to penalize us for not being in compliance. So compliance with the laws and regulations that are adopted by the state of California is a key element to this planning process. So what is the pieces to the puzzle here? We have community workshops, and this is the first of a series of those. We have an online community survey that is up on the city's website now, and you're able to take that. We'll give you the directions on how to access that here in a moment. We update the city's demographic conditions and do an extensive analysis of the policies, programs, and objectives that we have in the community. We look at a site analysis to accommodate our growth needs. Then we do the requisite environmental analysis to look at the impacts of that growth and change and mitigate them to a less than significant level. We go through a process of sending the information up to the state of California, getting their feedback on where the document and where the policies and programs and analysis can be improved or amended to get in a certification status or to show compliance with the statutory requirements. And then finally, at the end of the process is we go through the public hearing process with Planning Commission making a recommendation to the City Council for their ultimate adoption of a resolution supporting the housing element update and the requisite CEQA or environmental analysis. So you might ask yourself, after this seems like a lot of work, and we talk about this RHNA process and the needs allocations, et cetera. Well, we want to tell you what exactly RHNA is, and regional housing needs allocation. So what is RHNA? So regional housing needs allocation, it really is a quantification of our needs for housing in Dublin. And we do that throughout the state of California. So every city and county or jurisdiction, if you will, in the state gets one of these allocations. And it's really a process of looking at growth in population in California, the regional dynamic of where people are living, employment opportunities, transportation, jobs, et cetera, household formation, births and deaths, et cetera, within the state of California. So we put all of that in a blender and mix it all up. It comes out with a methodology to help us project what are assumed growth needs over the planning period. So that's at the high level. So if we go on to the next graphic that you see here, and we're going to go from left to right. So the State Department of Housing and Community Development, we call them HCD, they developed a statewide distribution of growth by regional agencies. In our case, it's the Association of Bay Area Governments. So ABAG, as we call it, ABAG gets a allocation of growth needs for the entire region. And it's the responsibility by the law for the local region, in this case, ABAG, to develop a methodology to slice a fair share distribution of that growth need within each jurisdiction within ABAG. So all the cities and counties that are in the Association of Bay Area Governments gets one slice of the pie. And we develop that methodology to say, what is our fair share allocation across all of those cities? And they vary, they're not exactly distributed evenly. It depends on that methodology that we talked about. So lots of different influencing factors. But at the end of the day, the City of Dublin's RHNA allocation for the 2023 to 2031 period is 3,719 units. And so what does that mean? Well, in the table that you'll see here on the screen in a moment, This is just an illustration of how we slice a pie for the city of Dublin. And what this means is that you see that total of 3,719 units. That is the growth need that is anticipated through the 2023 to 2031 planning period. So Dublin can assume that we have a need to develop and create 719 new housing units within that planning period. And each one of those 3,700 odd units are broken down further by income category. So if you can look at the left of the screen, you see the income categories, which are based on a percentage of the median family income for the county that you're in. In this case, it's 125,600 for 2021. That number changes every year just based on the economic conditions and could go up and down depending on the health of the economy. But generally speaking, that's where we're at today is 125,600. So for example, very low income is somebody up to 50% of that median family income. And if you look on the third column on the screen, it gives you just a sense of what is that income range. So a very low income person living in Dublin at 50% of the median family income could have a range of income up to say 68,500. And if you look at the far right column on the screen that says RENA allocation housing units, the very low income is there is a need for 1,085 very low income units. And when we say units, what does that mean? It could be a rental unit, or it could be a for sale unit. So it really depends on the price point. So if it's a rental, there's a certain affordability, a percentage of your income, 30%, that would be affordable, gives you a price point, or a mortgage of what you can actually pay. So depending on the tenure of what you live, it's this for sale or private, that number could change. But if we look at those income categories, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate, essentially that's a whole spectrum of need in your community. If you slice that right in the middle there, very low and low income are typically types of development that might be of higher density, and they typically have a need or little need for help to bring it to market. So you may see need for more creative financing or help or grants or other things or tax credits that will help bring those to market. Moderate income, above moderate income, generally speaking, can be developed through the development of, say, single family homes in your community that you see a lot of, or condos or things of that nature. Market rate units is what we like to call it. So what have we done as far as outreach for the community? And we've done a few things. We talked to the city council here, and as you'll see on the next slide, we've talked to the city council with a few check-ins on October 2020 and in November 2021 to provide an update on the process and what we should look at in terms of direction setting. No decisions haven't been made yet, but the sites analysis and the work done by the staff is looking at what sites we have available. We presented initially some of that information at those two check-ins to the city to talk about the regional housing needs allocation and the significance of that and how we have to plan for and some of the laws, rules, and regulations that will help us to look at that. So the council advised staff on different strategies to meet the RENA, that's geographically and where we distribute units, and the selection of sites, and conscious of not putting concentrations of units and of different affordabilities in one area and distribute that through the community. So that's where we stand so far in the process. So that's where we are all today. And there's a lot of work that we have before us. And one of the most important parts of this process is engaging within the community. And your voice matters, and the folks that are here on the workshop this evening, we appreciate your participation. So we want to reward you with the appreciation by giving you a chance to let us hear from you. We have a number of questions that we're going to use a little technology to use your web browser. So because you're on the Zoom, we know that you have a browser, so you can do two things. You can open up your smartphone and open up the browser, or you can open up another window in your computer screen and go to the menti.com. Is www.menti.com. It's up on the screen if you can't see that. And use the code that you see there on the top of the screen, 49511027. And you should have a little screen will pop up. So we'll give you just a few minutes or a few seconds to go to menti.com and then type in, it'll ask you for that code. So you can just type in that 49511027. It should let you in. So we'll give you just a moment to do that. And as we're waiting, you'll note that there is a chat function on the screen, and there's also a raise hand function. So we'll get to the raise hand function in a moment, but if you have any questions or any problems, just shout us out in that, and we should be able to give you some technical assistance. But you can see as people are starting to type in their ideas here, saying, what is your experience in housing? You can see it's going to start to show up on the screen, and we can walk through that as we see that. So we have sprawling is costly, and that's a pretty common phenomenon here in the northern part of the state with the cost of housing and the cost of land, et cetera. It's competitive, expensive, and but also there's that low density and not the the difference between, say, the city in San Francisco and this is it has a very different. In terms of your ability, and we have a few more coming in here, it looks like. Is there any more, want to give any more comments? You can also type it into your chat function on the screen if you're having additional problems. Any other ideas or comments about that? Oh, look at that. It's fast growing, and that's the challenge that you have in your community, that you're fast growing. You have 6,700 units to plan for in the next number of years. So that just means planning is of the utmost importance. So we want to make sure that we can do that. We have a comment on the screen. We'll get to that in a moment, Maria. Ms. Gomez had made a comment in the chat. We'll get to that just as we go through. So hang tight on that one. Any other comments? How about we try another one, see if we can get the hang of this. Let's go on to the next question. And you're going to see your screen refresh and give you an opportunity to say, what are some of the housing opportunities in your community in Dublin? Is there opportunities for rental housing? Is there opportunities that we see that is a missing segment of the need in your community that we can exploit? Things such as transit supportive development, affordable housing and things. What do you think? ADUs, and for those folks who may not be familiar with that, one of the comments that just came through is accessory dwelling units. That is something that there's a lot of new state law regulating the ability to develop ADUs in the community. So there's a lot of flexibility and opportunity for that within the City of Dublin. Recent passage of SB 9 is another indicator of that. There's limited affordable housing. And so we look at that from a policy standpoint, is how can we develop policies and programs that provide for the opportunity or expand that opportunity for affordable housing in the community. Any other thoughts you have here? It takes a few moments. Let me see, this is blocking my screen here. Transit-oriented development or transit-supportive development. We know you have a facility in your community and there's already some transit-oriented development occurring there, and expanding that over the course of the planning process as well. Looks like you have a couple more people wanting to add comments as well. Upzoning. So we have, if you're not familiar with that term, we have existing zoning or the rules that govern the use of land. So for example, we have an area that says you can do 20 dwelling units an acre. It has all these regulations, and there's the opportunity to increase the development capacity on existing sites. So you up zone the current policy they have within your community, which is great. Any other big ideas? This is not the it's not the be all end all. So if something comes up in your head later, you're going to have opportunities in the future. So don't despair if you have that. How about the next one? Let's do one more, a few more. So one of the challenges we have, and remember that we're looking at ways to solve problems, and we're looking at the ways to make our community better, ways to identify the challenges we have in the community and flip it on its head and create the opportunities. So these challenges are just those opportunities in disguise. But in order to address them, we need to know what they are. So what do you think some of the challenges to housing or needs for housing are in your community? Public transit's one comment that came through. So we have the accessibility public, or the ability for people to access public transportation. What about walkability of your community, making it walkable? When we have a spread out community and little enclaves of development, for example, maybe less inclined to walk from place to place. And so integration of land uses become important. This is +1 to limited public transit. So we have a double vote on that one. Limited access to that, and seems to be important. Affordability, that's a challenge for everybody, I think. And well, some of us may be lucky on that one, but I think the issue with affordability comes to not just rental, but also for purchase. You have the environmental concerns that some of you folks is obviously the impacts to the environment, but also the impacts to our infrastructure and our needs for schools. And when we have increases in population, what does that do to our schools? Not just on the facilities, but the quality of that education within our communities. And so, like you said, here is just impacts and overcrowding to schools, and proper planning as we grow in a sensible way. Traffic is always the issue that is related to housing, right? Especially if we have development that is spread out through a community, is creating more of that burden on our roadway system. And there's a lot of relationship you see here between traffic, public transportation, walkability of your community, and then the concerns that you have. So there's a lot of integration of these challenges, even as you see on the screen. You have the bureaucratic red tape, or the hoops that you have to jump through to get through a process. So in order for me to say, yes, we have to do these things, we have to go through by these rules. And so what is that red tape, or reducing that possibly? Infrastructure, water and electricity is another one that just came up on there. That's great. And let's see, do we have another one for us? So here's a fun one. I want you to kind of, don't close your eyes literally, but just kind of close your eyes and think about the future of your community. And in some cases, we're not thinking about it for ourselves, but we're thinking about for our children and our grandchildren. So we think of, in the future, what is that vision for your community? What would you like to see? What is that ultimate end? Or what is that place that we want to become that we may not be today, but we strive for? And so if you can just close your eyes metaphorically and think about what that means to you, what is that vision of housing for the city of Dublin? And one of the comments here is transit-oriented districts, and with a smiley face on it. So that's even said in a great way. Reduce miles driven, mixed use, and we hear a lot of this about transportation and accessibility and integration of land uses. So when we reduce the miles that we drive, or the places that we need to get in our cars and go from place to place, that is associated too with mixed use. And when you say mixed use, it's the integration of residential, non-residential, or different uses together. Maybe not vertically, but also vertically and also horizontally, but in close proximity to each other. So they're integrated and work well. Affordable units and places for people to access housing in your community at all affordability levels. Mixed income housing, and that's a big one we hear of in the region, is that there's opportunities for people of a variety of incomes that can work, live together in the same location. So we have those communities that are well integrated, not just socially, but from an income standpoint as well. Let's see. Looks like we have any more comments? We might have a few more coming through. Again, just we have some comments. It looks like we wanted to have a couple questions in there that we'll get to. Let's see here. All right, why don't we move on? We're going back. So here's the fun part. We want to give you some discussions. And so this is an opportunity for you as a member of the community. And obviously we're going to be respectful of everybody's time and be kind in our words. But we have a function on your screen that you can use, a raise hand function. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little hand, literally just like that. If you click that raise hand button, it will raise your hand and we can call on you and bring you off mute, and you can express some of the comments you have and the things that you want us to know. But before we do that, there was a few questions in the chat, and we'll see if we can make sure you do that. Maria Gomez, I believe, asked the question, have a question about how many units have been built in the last 4 years, how many of those units have been rent or low income, and how many are for sale. There are a lot of data in there. I don't know if we can answer that directly, but I'm going to tell you this. We're doing the analysis in the housing element that will answer those exact questions. So we have that on the screen, and we'll be sure to be able to show you exactly where we have. But anecdotally, if the staff wanted to answer that question, they'll either do it in the chat or they can come off mute and make a comment there. So thank you, Maria, for that question. We had the question of the RENA number, and that 6,719 is the planning number that we'll be using. Want to note that across the region, these numbers are generally higher than we've seen in the past, and that goes almost across the board. So the governor had said in his discussions that these are stretch goals, but even at their goals, it's still legislated by the rules, and the regional housing needs assessment process has determined those numbers, and the city by law are obligated to follow with those numbers. So I would think that's Kashef, that was your comment. And it looks like Tom, Mr. Evans, you had some comments on the actual screen about affordable housing and for sale housing. We captured that in the discussion. And Ms. Lewandowski says, what is the balance on number of housing units in the fifth cycle? And can staff tell offhand what the fifth cycle allocation was? We have that handy. You can...
Yeah, I can bring it up in 1 second, and I can bring our progress to date.
Yeah, we should be good. And then Maria, Michael, who just spoke, is replied to some of your questions that the city had issued 770 units in 2021, 500 in 2020, 241 in 2019, and 787 in 2018. We won't make you do the math on that, but it seems to be the numbers that we have. So you can see a kind of a trend in what those numbers are over the course of the years.
And Dave, I have information on that question, right?
Sure.
So for the fifth cycle, we were allocated 2,285 units, and up through calendar year 2020, Of those, we had 1,536 units remaining. We've more than satisfied our above moderate category, but we still have some remaining units in our very low, low, and moderate income categories. This is not including data for 2021, which we're in the process of preparing our annual progress report and extrapolating that data.
That's a great answer to that question. Thank you. All right, so we have the open discussion. We have a list of all of the folks that are participating on the screen. So if you hit the raised hand function, we will know that you want to say something, and we'll bring you off mute. You can provide your testimony, comments, or recommendations to the good of the process. Also, if you wanted to type that information in onto your chat function, if you're a little shy this evening or eating your dinner as you're participating, feel free to type that into the chat. We'll provide that comment to the public as well. So does anybody have a desire to make a public comment at this point? We're happy to listen to what you have to say. Let's see if we have, we'll just monitor the chat at this point. And so it looks like we have a number of you that are participating now, and don't be shy. We'll give a prize. Mr. Evans, you are raising your hand, and Kashef, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, your ability to do that. So I don't know, Michael, you may have to pull them off of mute there, but Mr. Evans and Mr. Kadri is going to make it.
So we'll start with Mr. Evans.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've come out of the woodwork here. Maybe can you explain, because I got here just a little bit late. I didn't realize this was going on, and just what do we accomplish with the workshop tonight? What types of input are you looking for? I guess maybe that's it.
We had a number of questions that you had on the screen, and there's two reasons for the workshop. It's an introduction to the process. But you also want to get an idea of express to us what you think those needs are within your community. So as we start to develop, and we're just embarking on this process, this is really an open discussion at this point to say, what are the things that we need to think about? What are the things that we need to consider? What are you concerned about? What do you hope for in the future? This is just general questions. But also, Tom, as we go through the process, at the tail end of this, as we're completing this open discussion, we'll give you a link and how to take a survey that is going to give you a little more direction, a little more deeper dive into some of the things that we're looking at. But generally this evening, it's just an open mic night, if you will, to kind of have an overall introductory conversation about housing in your community at the you know, the general level, and what you see in the future for the next 8 years or so of the priorities and needs of the community, and what you think should be fixed, what you think should be thought about or addressed. So that's what we're looking for. Did you have any comments?
Yeah, thank you. There's one item. I don't know if this applies now or not, but something I've seen happen is developers using mellow roofs as a way to get future buyers of their properties to pay for the utilities and streets and sewers that are normally paid for by the developer. That's one practice that I would like to see halted in Dublin. It's never happened until recently, but I always worry then that once there's a crack in the dam, that then everybody will try to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you're familiar with that in particular, but sure. I'd like to, you know, once again, for 60 years, that hasn't happened in Dublin, and kind of all of a sudden now we're looking at it. So I'd like to see that rolled back.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything else, Mr. Evans, to add?
No. Well, yes, I guess I do. I apologize. I have seen, you know, quite a lot of growth. I guess everybody probably says this, but you know, it would be nice to have a little more control on the rate of growth in our city. And if we had, you know, inclusionary housing parts of our municipal code that were like other cities, we might do better getting toward that affordable housing RENA numbers. But we do seem to let people off the hook on a regular basis. It would be nice to follow that and actually improve on it. So I'm done.
Great, thank you, sir. Appreciate your comment.
Good, Dave. Our next speaker is Shirley Lewandowski.
You have the floor, Ms. Lewandowski.
Good, thank you. I just wanted to add to what Tom was saying just now. The situation for Dublin, where most residents have concern, is that we are very much high percentage on market rate housing and not doing so well with affordable housing. And one of the things that we have as far as inclusionary is Dublin's at 12.5%, and other cities are at 15 and or 20. And I'd like to see the city increase that percentage from 12.5 to 15 or 20 or even higher if possible. And that certainly is the council's decision to do that. And the reason there's a concern is because in that 12.5%, there's only a requirement to meet 40% of that. So, but excuse me, by the time you actually figure that in, where developers are able to, you know, have an out with by paying in lieu fees, then you end up with maybe just 7.5% of meeting the affordable units that should have been built. And what I find out is that it is much more attractive for developers to pay in lieu fees because it's a lot less than what it would take for them to build an actual affordable unit. So this is a challenge because Dublin is, you know, has more than met its market rate housing or above moderate. And the concern is that your typical essential worker is not really able to even afford what's called affordable housing. So a lot of times you hear that developers will build a certain amount of units for affordable, and then you start to ask, what does that mean as far as, you know, percentage of the median income? And yet, if you take a look at an essential worker that works here in Dublin for $15 an hour, and they're commuting from miles away just to work here, they can't afford to live here because even what we consider our affordable housing is really very difficult for them to meet or to be able to afford. So I know one of the things our council did is they did appeal the RENA numbers for the sixth cycle. And a lot of cities did that as well. And they were essentially denied. So that's the concern many residents here in Dublin have, is that we're not against housing. We certainly would like a much more balanced, good planning, much more, you know, not necessarily having to meet the above moderate type of housing. And we'd like to, and sometimes it looks like the system doesn't really work well for the affordable, for the people that need to be able to afford. So sometimes there is thoughts that the system is rigged, that in order to make more affordable housing, to afford affordable housing, you have to build more market rate housing. And there's something there that doesn't seem right. So again, that's just a comment by a lot of residents here, because we're seeing a lot more urban sprawl, and we'd like to have much more balanced decision-making from our city management. So thank you for letting me have my say.
You're welcome, very much so. We appreciate that. Any other comments or hope to raise your hand? I saw somebody had theirs up earlier, but came back down. So maybe their comment was articulated. Of the group that's on the phone, is there any more comments? Again, you can use the chat function as well. And this is all being recorded, and also the chat is saved as well. So you'll get a summary of that and have access to that at a later date. Mr. Evans, you have another comment? You feel free to take him off mute, Michael.
He's been taken off.
Yeah, I just thought there, in terms of having balanced growth, one thing that I see a lot is residential built close to BART. And to me, it seems like it should be the other way around, that we should have commercial close to BART. I mean, by having residences close to BART, we're basically saying, we want you to get on the train and go work in another city. I would rather have people get on the train and come to Dublin to work. So if there's anything we can do along those lines, I would think that would be good for our city in terms of a more balanced growth. And that's all I have for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Mr. Richard Lee, you have your hand up.
For hosting this, and thanks to everyone for their comments. I just wanted to counter a little bit of what Tom says. I think the way that it's currently thought out of, where we do want to build some more of that transit-oriented development and transit-oriented communities, I think that makes a lot more sense, especially when you're thinking about a lot of the people, and I'm thinking especially the educators who are working in our schools, can't afford to live here. And that's sort of the problem that Shirley was talking about as well. And I just don't see how having more people from outside the city to commute in is really going to help solve that problem, when the issue is we don't really have enough housing and affordable housing in particular in the city already. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Shirley, it looks like you want a second bite.
Yes, I do.
Feel free.
Okay, thank you so much. I think one of the things also a lot of residents have concern is that a lot of the developments are actually coming through and being approved. There is a lot of concern with the impact to the schools. Actually, the school themselves have actually asked for some pause on some of these developments because our schools are already overcrowded. And with the additional development that continually comes through our city, there is a definite stressful on the schools, because our schools, many of them are already overcrowded, and the school is actually saying there will probably not be any more room for the children that would be coming out of new developments. So, there is that concern, but yet there are developments that still come through. So please know that's a big concern by a lot of the residents here in Dublin, is the impact of the schools.
Thank you, Shirley. So I know we like to keep our promises in terms of the timing. We have just a few minutes left, and we wanted to share with you the remaining schedule, and then a way that you can continue to have your dialogue in the process, and some contact information. So bear with us for just a few more minutes, but we have a schedule of accomplishments that we're looking forward to for this next first part of this year. We're doing the workshop. You have this workshop, and we apologize we couldn't be in person, but with the COVID considerations, etc., this has worked, but we do appreciate your conversation here this evening. There is a community survey that's available that we'll show you in just a moment of how to access. And so that's going to provide us for additional opportunities for you to provide your input. We'll have another workshop in February that will get you some more information so we can get a little smart on some of the actual issues that you brought up, for example, in our conversation today, to help us to guide into the directions. And then we'll have in the early part of spring a number of study sessions with the Planning Commission, the City Council, to further explore those directions and the policy considerations. And we'll lead that up to a public review draft of a document in April, and a community review of that process in the latter part of spring and early part of summer of this year. So with that, the next portion of that is this community survey. And we do have a survey that's on the city's website. If you go to the Housing Element web page, there's a link there at the bottom of the screen. And you can click on the actual form, which is going to give you ability to take the survey. It is available in English and in Mandarin. So if you have folks who are Mandarin speakers or more comfortable in that, please let them know that they are encouraged to take the survey. You can see the direct link to that survey form there on the screen, but you can click through the Dublin's Housing Element webpage and get the access to that as well. So what we wanted to express to you is really that your participation in this process and is important. And as we move on to the next slide, your input is important because it helps us develop those goals, those policies and programs that will guide the future. So just as the comments that you had this evening, the information that you're providing us is really starting to paint the picture of the needs of our community. And we address those needs by these goals, policies, and programs that seek to get to the places where we want to be and address the challenges that we have today or we could see into the future. So your participation is a vital element to this process, and we want to continuously hear your ideas through this process. And your information and participation is something that you will be able to see through the course of this process. So we aren't ignoring it. We're making diligent efforts to include that in the process of decision making. So as we go through this process, we do have contact information for you up on the screen. And Michael Cass, who is the principal planner, is the primary contact. He loves to get emails all the time, especially late at night. I'm just kidding. The information for his email is on the screen, and his direct phone number is there. If you have questions or comments or concerns or would like more information about the process, you can contact Michael. But you also, one of the great ways to do it is to go to the city's Housing Element Update webpage. You can see the link there on the screen. It's easy accessible through the city's main dublin.ca.gov website. You can sign up for e-notifications about the Housing Element on the webpage. So if you type in your email, get that information once new stuff is uploaded, or workshops or other information that would be important for you to know, you'll get an email alert. So that's a great way for you to keep abreast and engage in the process. So with that, we promised we'd finish right up at 7, and we're about there. And I wanted to thank you all on behalf of the city and the mayor and the city council that your participation is much appreciated. We continue to look forward to your engagement through the process. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Cass for any final comments.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you everyone for attending tonight's community workshop. Once again, this is our first workshop. We do have our second workshop scheduled in February. Additionally, as Dave mentioned, we do encourage you to complete the survey, which is available online through the end of February. And those who may have missed it, rather than writing it down, you can quickly click on the link that we've put in the chat as well to make it a little bit more accessible for you. Again, thank you again. We really appreciate everyone coming out this evening to participate and help guide our housing policy for the next housing element. Thank you.
And this will conclude the workshop, and we'll be in the background stand for just a few minutes, but the official workshop will end in a moment. And one of the staff will click the link to the website in the chat. So if you wanted a quick way to link to to the website, you'll see it come up in the chat function there. So with that, we wanted to thank you all, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Stay healthy and happy, and we look forward to your continued involvement in this process. So again, thank you very much. And this concludes our meeting for this evening. Thank you.